Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 1. We're talking about life. We're talking about basic life principles. We just got done talking about the relationship between DNA, genes, and chromosomes. DNA is the code. The code is used to write genes. A collection of genes is called a chromosome. English is the code that you use to write a recipe. You hold recipes in a recipe book. You don't just have one recipe book, you have many. All life uses the same basic process to follow DNA instructions and turn them into finished products. Following the instructions, a gene, and turning them into a product. So you read the recipe, you put the things together that it says, and you end up with a product. The diversity of life, all of the different living things, there's 2-ish million species of things on the planet, comes from the different combinations of DNA, the different ways in which the code is put together. How many different ways can you put English words together to get different meanings, to get different sentences? And the answer is almost limitless. You can put them together to get different sentences. You can put DNA together to get different products. Here we see a cell at the top. Remember, this must be a eukaryotic cell because we have a nucleus. Within that eukaryotic cell is DNA. Here is an example of DNA. Notice how DNA, can you untwist that in your mind? If you untwist this, what I actually end up with is essentially just a ladder. It's just a ladder. Imagine that I had taken a ladder and I have wrapped it around the trunk of a tree as it goes up. That's what I see here. We say that DNA is a double helix. It's like a rope ladder. A regular ladder would not be flexible enough to wrap around a tree, so I'm going to take a rope ladder and I'm going to wrap it around a tree, and that's what we see here. The steps of the ladder are these A's and T's and G's and C's. A always binds to T and G always binds to C. This is the code. A's and T's and G's and C's. That is the code of DNA. And in several more chapters, we'll talk more about how you read the code. The entire library of genes that an organism has is called its genome. If you were to take and say that your entire library of chromosomes, that's your genome. Your entire library of recipe books is your genome. The human genome has been sequenced. We know what all of the genes are, and let me start over. We know what all of the words are in the human genome. We don't necessarily know what all the recipes specifically are. We're still working on that. Diversity is the hallmark of life. There are, like I said, about 2 million different species currently described. We say that life is really tenacious, which means once life gets a grip somewhere, it's really hard to get rid of it. Life is really good at continuing. And because the planet that we live on has so many different habitats, because the planet we live on has so many different ecosystems, it means that there are so many different living things. Pretty much everywhere you go on this planet, you're going to find a living thing. You're going to find life. We found probably about, give or take, 2 million different species. There's probably 10-ish million species yet to be found. Question. How do we know how many we don't know? Oh, well, it's just a shot in the dark then. It's just a wild guess. It's not just a wild guess. Imagine that you collect baseball cards. And you want to get all of the cards for one particular season. You want to collect all 200 cards from the season. The very first pack that you open up, how many of those cards are going to be repeats? Well, none. It's my first pack. I just opened this first pack. None of them are repeats. And if you open a half a dozen packs that first day, how many repeats are you going to get? Well, I don't know. I might get 1, maybe 2, depending on how common they are. And if you go every day and you buy 6 packs of cards or 10 packs of cards every single day, what's going to happen pretty quickly? How quickly are you going to start to see repeats? How quickly are you going to find the same card that you've found before? And the answer is, well, the really common ones are going to be easy to find. I'm going to start seeing those a lot easier. I'm going to find them pretty quickly. But the rare cards, it's going to take me a while before I start seeing repeats of those. So what happens when you have gotten to the point to where you have probably half of all of the cards there are to get? What does that mean each time you open a new pack of cards? If I have gotten half of all of the cards there are to get, what are my chances each day going forward of me finding new cards that I haven't seen before? Will my chances go up or go down? Well, if I already got half of them, that means that there are about as many to find as I have found, which means as each day goes by, my chances of finding a new card is going to go down. And what happens when I get to where I've gotten 80% of all the cards there are to get? How often am I actually going to find a new one? And the answer is not very often. I might go several days of opening packs and not finding a card I don't have. So as you get close to the end of collecting all of the cards, it becomes harder and harder to find new cards you haven't seen before. Scientists go out and they look for new species every day. Scientists look for new species every single year, and then they publish their findings in magazines. So what we have to do then is we have to look at the rate of new species. How many new species do we find each year? Are we finding more new species each year, or are we finding fewer new species each year? What would happen if we had found half of all the species there are to find? What should happen to our rate of discovery? If we found half of them, well, it should start getting harder to find new species. So we should start seeing our rate of discovery, new species found in a year, should start going down. And what do we see? We see that the rate of discovery is still going up, which means we're finding new species, more new species each year than we found the year before. So how do we know how many we don't know? It is a guess, but it's not an uneducated guess. We're probably not quite at a third of all the species there are to find. Finding a species means you get to name it. Naming species is called taxonomy. And you don't just take a name, you don't just pick a name at random. You've got to follow some rules when you do that. Taxonomy is the series of rules that you have to follow to name a species. Taxonomy classifies living things. The way we classify living things is into these categories: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And let me explain how this is set up. So, domain. There are currently 3 domains of life. Think of the domain like a continent. How many continents are there? Well, there's 7. Which continent do you live on? Well, I live on the North American continent. Okay. Within each domain, there are several kingdoms. On each continent, there are several countries. What countries are on the North American continent? Canada, the US, and Mexico. Okay. Well, which of those countries do you live in? Well, I live in the US. Okay. Continent, country. Within the country that you live in, there are several states. Within each kingdom, there are many phyla. What is the state that you live in? Well, you probably live in Georgia. Many states, the one that you live in is Georgia. Within Georgia, there are many counties. Within each phylum, there are many classes. What county do you live in? I live in Bleckley County. Within each county, there are, okay, not always, but just kind of work with me here. There are several cities, towns. In Bleckley, we could argue there are several communities. Let's pick a different county like Lawrence County. It's a little bit easier. How many different towns are there in Lawrence County? Well, there's Dudley, and there's Dexter, and there's Dublin. There are a number of East Dublin. There are a number of different counties, right? Excuse me, there are a number of different towns in a county. County, town. Within a town, There are several streets. What street do you live on? Within a street, there are several houses. The genus, within a house, there's one particular room where you live. What is the room that you're currently in? This is how I go from a planet all the way down to the room that you're in. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Continent, country, state, county, town, street, house, your room.